He walked into the courthouse just like any other morning, calm, composed, respected by everyone who knew his name. But within seconds, everything changed. A young officer stopped him at the door, not knowing who he was, not asking the right questions, not seeing the truth standing right in front of him. And in front of a crowded lobby, a black judge was treated like a suspect in his own courthouse. Whispers spread, phones started recording, the air turned heavy with silence and shock. But what no one realized was this wasn't just a mistake. It was a moment that would expose something much deeper about power, respect, and prejudice. And when the truth finally came out, the entire courthouse froze. Because what happened next didn't just end a career, it revealed a reality no one wanted to face. So the question is, how could something like this happen in a place built for justice? He wore the badge for less than a week but acted like he owned the city. One courtroom, one routine hearing. One moment that should have been ordinary, until a young officer decided a black judge did not deserve respect. What followed silenced lawyers, stunned deputies, and left an entire courthouse frozen in disbelief. Because the man he tried to humiliate was far more powerful than he realized. But by the time the truth came out, the damage was already done. How far can arrogance go before it destroys everything? Judge Marcus Ellison had spent more than 2 decades building a reputation no one could question. He was known across the city as fair, disciplined, and impossible to intimidate. Long before he wore judicial robes, he had fought through barriers that tried to block every step of his career. He studied harder, worked longer, and carried himself with a calm strength that made people listen without a single word. Every morning, he arrived at the courthouse before most of the staff. He reviewed files carefully, treated every case with respect, and reminded people through his actions that justice should belong to everyone. Clerks trusted him, attorneys respected him. Even officers who stood in the courtroom understood they were in the presence of someone who had earned every inch of authority he carried. But outside that courtroom, respect was not always guaranteed. A new recruit had just joined courthouse security, Officer Daniel Reeves. Fresh from the academy, young, impatient, and eager to prove himself, he walked through the halls like rank mattered more than wisdom. He had heard Marcus Ellison's name many times, but not the story behind it. To him, the judge was only another face in a robe. That morning, the courthouse felt different. Conversations were shorter. Staff exchanged uneasy glances as Reeves barked orders no one asked for. He seemed determined to show everyone he was in control. Judge Ellison noticed the tension the moment he stepped through the doors. He said nothing. He simply continued toward his courtroom, carrying the same calm presence he always had. But some storms do not announce themselves loudly. Within minutes, one reckless decision would turn a normal day into a public humiliation attempt no one inside that building would ever forget. The courthouse doors had barely settled behind Judge Marcus Ellison when Officer Daniel Reeves stepped directly into his path. The young recruit's jaw was tight, his posture stiff with the kind of confidence that often comes before humiliation. Staff members nearby slowed their pace, sensing trouble before a single word was spoken. Marcus kept walking, calm as ever, holding a folder of case files against his side. He had faced hostility before. He had learned that some people confuse silence with weakness. Reeves was about to make that mistake. Without warning, the officer raised a hand and blocked the judge from entering the secured hallway that led to the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Clerks froze behind the reception desk. Lawyers stopped mid-step, watching from a distance. Reeves demanded identification. The request itself was not unusual, the tone was. It carried suspicion, contempt, and something even uglier beneath it. Marcus, dressed in a tailored suit and carrying official court documents, stood only feet away from the portrait wall lined with judges of the past. Yet Reeves stared at him as if he did not belong in the building at all. Marcus reached calmly into his pocket. Before he could present anything, Reeves snatched the folder from his hand. Papers spilled across the marble floor like scattered evidence. Case notes, schedules, legal documents, pieces of a carefully ordered morning now spread beneath strangers' shoes. A hush fell over the room. Marcus bent slowly to gather the papers, but Reeves stepped closer, forcing him back upright. The message was clear: stay where you are. Several employees exchanged horrified looks. They knew exactly who Marcus was. They also knew why this was happening. Reeves had ignored white attorneys, passed senior staff without question, and waved others through all morning. But the black man in front of him had become his target. Still, Marcus remained composed. That calm only seemed to fuel the officer more. Reeves called for backup. Within moments, 2 more officers arrived, confused by the urgency in the radio call. They approached cautiously, then hesitated when they saw Marcus Ellison standing in silence. One recognized him immediately and glanced at Reeves with visible alarm. But the rookie, blinded by ego, kept pushing forward. He ordered Marcus to place his hands where everyone could see them. Now people were gathering from every direction: court reporters, defendants waiting for hearings, families seated on benches. A courthouse built on dignity had become a stage for disrespect. Marcus slowly raised his hands, not out of fear, but out of discipline. He understood something Reeves did not: power is often loudest when it is weakest. The officer moved to pat him down, and that was the moment the elevator doors opened. A senior administrator stepped out, followed by the chief bailiff and two attorneys rushing toward the scene. Their faces changed instantly when they saw papers on the floor, officers surrounding Marcus, and Reeves preparing to search the man scheduled to preside over the city's most important hearing that morning. But even then, Reeves did not step back. He doubled down, and what happened next would end his career before it had truly begun. Officer Daniel Reeves reached for Judge Marcus Ellison's arm, ready to force him against the wall in front of everyone watching. The lobby had gone completely silent. No footsteps, no whispers. Only the sharp sound of papers sliding across marble and the heavy breathing of a man too blinded by arrogance to stop. Then the chief bailiff stepped between them. His voice thundered through the courthouse like a warning siren. Faces turned. Even the backup officers stiffened. Reeves froze, confused, still gripping the judge's sleeve as if he had authority over the moment. The senior administrator moved next, lifting the scattered documents from the floor. Every page carried the same seal. Every folder carried the same name: Judge Marcus Ellison. The realization hit the room all at once. A stunned murmur spread through the crowd. Attorneys who had watched in disbelief now stood openly horrified. Families waiting for hearings stared at Reeves as his confidence drained from his face. The young officer looked from the documents to the robe bag beside Marcus, then to the courtroom doors now standing open behind him. He had not stopped a stranger. He had publicly humiliated the man who ruled the very courtroom he was assigned to protect. But the deepest shock was not that he had mistaken a judge's identity. It was that he never bothered to ask with respect in the first place. Marcus straightened his jacket, then calmly picked up the final paper from the floor himself. No anger, no shouting, no revenge. Just dignity so powerful it made everyone else feel smaller. Reeves tried to speak, but nothing came out. The backup officers stepped away from him. The chief bailiff ordered his badge removed on the spot pending investigation. Gasps echoed through the lobby as trembling hands unclipped the symbol he had worn like a weapon only minutes earlier. Marcus looked across the crowd, then toward the courtroom waiting for justice to begin. And without saying a word, he walked past the officer who had tried to break him. That silent walk would become the loudest lesson anyone in that courthouse ever heard. Judge Marcus Ellison entered his courtroom exactly on time. The room rose as it always did, but that morning felt different. People were not standing only for a judge. They were standing for a man who had just been tested in the most public and humiliating way and still chose dignity over rage. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. His focus never wavered. To everyone watching, it was clear: the officer had tried to strip him of respect, but respect cannot be taken from someone who truly owns it. Outside the courtroom, the fallout moved quickly. Officer Daniel Reeves was suspended before noon. Internal investigators reviewed witness statements, security footage, and a pattern of aggressive behavior reported by staff earlier that same day. Training protocols were questioned. Hiring standards were examined. People who had stayed silent before began speaking openly about smaller acts of bias they had witnessed for years, because racism is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like suspicion without reason. Sometimes it looks like disrespect disguised as procedure. Sometimes it looks like assuming a black man in a courthouse must explain himself while others walk freely past. Judge Ellison never gave a press conference. He never demanded attention. He simply returned to work the next day, carrying himself with the same discipline that had taken decades to build. And in doing so, he exposed a truth many people spend their lives avoiding: titles do not protect people from prejudice. Wealth does not erase it. Status does not outrun it. If it could happen to a judge in his own courthouse, where else is it happening every day to people with no audience, no cameras, and no power at all? That is why stories like this matter. Not because one officer lost a badge, but because a system was forced for one moment to look in the mirror. So the real question is not what happened to him. The real question is what still happens when no one is watching.